Well, good evening, class. Today we're going to be talking about Lesson 3.3, and this is stuff you've seen before. We're going to be talking about the measures of central tendency. Now, you might hear that and think, measures of central tendency? I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never seen measures of central tendency. But you have seen them before. Measures of central tendency is a fancy name to say mean, median, and mode. And you might ask, well, why are these things called measures of central tendency? Think about what the word central means. Central means kind of the typical, kind of in the middle. Okay, now I said kind of in the middle because if you think about what the words mean, median, and mode mean, they mean the mean is a fancy name for the average, the median is a fancy name for the middle number, and the mode is the one that happens the most often, the most commonly occurring number. Okay, so we don't mean the median per se. But if you think about a whole bunch of numbers, okay, and let's say I had 11, 12, 13, 12, 11, 12, 13, and I said, the numbers are all in the around 12-ish, okay? Now, I could describe the numbers using the average, and that would kind of describe a typical number. I could actually line the numbers up and do the median and actually find the middle number, and I could identify kind of the typical value like that, or I could find the one that happened the most and say, well, a typical number is kind of like this. All of those kind of describe the data set. They kind of describe a typical data point. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, okay? And again, median is precisely in the middle. Average, average, if you think about a bunch of numbers, average isn't going to be the smallest number or the biggest number. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. Okay, now the mode is a little bit more variable. Sometimes the mode could be the very smallest numbers or the very biggest numbers. The mode can kind of be all over the place. But these three terms, mean, median, and mode, are called measures of central tendency. Okay, and that's probably the newest part of this whole lesson, so I would expect that to be in your daily quiz. Okay, so mean, median, mode, the fancy name for those in statistical terms is their measures of central tendency. All right, now again, we know how to find these. The mean, you add up all the numbers and you find the average. The median, you go ahead and put all the numbers in order and you kind of tick them off from one side and the other and you find the middle number. And the mode, you look at all the numbers and you find the one that happens the most. Okay, so let's write this out. Again, mean is nothing more than a fancy name for average. Add them all up and divide by how many there are. Okay, the median, make sure you put them in order. I'm going to put this in red because I want to make sure everybody remembers this. This is the part that people tend to forget when they do median. So put all the numbers in order first, then find the middle number. And then finally the mode is the one that happens the most often. Okay, and I'll actually go ahead and put that often in there too. So it's the one that happens the most often. All right, and that's pretty straightforward, and that's what they mean. Now, it isn't quite that simple. Each of these has something that we need to be a little bit careful of. All right. Now the mean, the reason I like to remember the mean, imagine if I gave you lists of numbers that had 10 to 20 numbers each, and they were all decimals, and I kept asking you to find the mean. Well, that would be kind of a mean homework or classwork assignment. All right. That would be a lot of work, and we wouldn't really like doing that. So that's how you remember mean. Okay. Out in front of the school, I'm going to actually underline that. That's how we remember mean. Okay, out in front of the school, there's something called a median on Georgian Way, and that's that grass thing in the middle. And again, it's called the median because it's in the middle of the road. So that's how you can remember that. And mode, the way we remember mode is it starts with the letters M-O, just like the word most. All right, let me backtrack again. So each of these is actually a little tricky. Now, the reason that the average is tricky is it's just an awful lot of math. It could just be very tedious if you had to do a lot of them. Okay, so just be careful that we don't make math errors, especially, and actually most of the mean errors are actually made when you add up all your data points. So if you're doing it by hand and you're not using a calculator, that's where most of the math mistakes come. So be really careful of that. We already said for the median, you really have to remember to put the numbers in order. Also, sometimes you get a tie. If you have an even number of points, there'll be two things in the middle. So let's say we put all of our numbers in order, and there's a 12 and a 13, and they're right smack dab in the middle. So I cross out all the other numbers on the front and the back, and these are the two middle numbers. And if you count all my little tick marks, there would have been 10 numbers here, and these would be the middle two. So all you do to solve the tie is you do like a little mini-mean. Literally, you just find the number right between 12 and 13. So in this case, the median would be 12.5. If the numbers are harder, just add them together and divide in half. Okay, that's not the same as the mean. It's the same process, but instead of adding all the numbers together and dividing by how many there are, we're just going to add the middle two together. Okay, so that's what you do if there's two things in the middle. So we've got to be careful about that. So we've got to put things in order, and we have to solve ties in the median if we have an even number of numbers. Okay, the mean we have to be really careful because there's an awful lot of math in it, and it's very easy to make a math error. And the mode is complicated because there isn't always just one clear number that happens the most. Sometimes we have ties. Okay, if we have ties where maybe we have a whole bunch of numbers and two of them happen the most, then they're both the modes. So you can have more than one mode. You can even have crazy numbers. Let's say I had 11 numbers. All right, I'm going to make this pretty easy, and I'm not going to write them all out, but just listen carefully. Let's say I had 11 numbers. And let's say for the first 10 of the numbers, I had pairs of 2 1s, like 1 1, then 2 2, then 3 3, then 4 4, and then 5 5, and then 1 6. Well, which number happened the most? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all happened 2 times, and 6 only happened once. So the modes would literally be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, that's not complicated enough. Okay, there's one more trick. What if I go ahead and I got one more number in that set and I add another 6? Now you got a 6-way tie, don't you? You have 2 of every single number. Well, it turns out if no number happens more than any other number, then the way we break the ties, we just say there's no mode. Okay, so we have to be careful of ties when we're doing the mode, and we also have to be careful of ones where nothing happens more than anything else. Either everything only happens one time, or we have multiple ties where everything happens the same number of times. In that case, there's no mode. All right. Like I said, mode can be kind of a little bit persnickety. All right. It seems like it's a really easy one, but when you really get into it, some of the very particular rules about mode actually make it pretty tricky. So while mean, median, mode are familiar to you, no doubt, there are things to watch out for. So the stuff I've written down in red is stuff that we have to be really careful of. All right, well, all of this is a lot of me talking, so let's go ahead and actually do one of these. So let's take an example here, and for this data set, I've got 6 numbers, they're all decimals, and we're going to find all 3 of the measures of central tendency, the mean, the median, and the mode. All right, and what I like to do to get started is I like to put all of the numbers in order. All right, and the way I do that is I look through the list and I find the smallest number. In this case, it's actually right at the beginning, and I cross it out and I put 2.3 down. And then I look through the list and I find the next number. There's another 2.3, so I'm going to put that down, 2.3. And I cross them out as I go. Now, I don't want to scribble them out. I want to be able to look back, and I would do this in pencil in real life in case I made a mistake. Okay, the next is 2.7. Followed by 2.9, and again, I'm going to write it down and cross it out. 3.2, and notice what I'm doing, I'm putting all the numbers in order. Okay, and it's going to make a lot of things a lot easier. 3.2, cross it out, 4.3. Now, to make sure I didn't accidentally add a number or leave one out, I'm going to count the original numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then I'm going to count my new numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if these two match, there's a pretty good chance I did it correctly. All right. Now, obviously, that set me up really nicely to do the median. So let's go ahead and do the median. And I'll show you a trick. Instead of crossing out like we did above, one thing I can do when I do the median is instead of crossing out, I can just underline the numbers. So let's underline the first and the last number. Now let's do the second from the front and second from the back. And now I can see my middle numbers. It's one of those ties. So the median is going to be the number that's right between 2.7 and 2.9, and we can do that in our heads. It's obviously 2.8. Okay, if these numbers were harder, just add them together and divide by 2. All right, so that one's done. That's one of the measures of central tendency. All right, by putting the numbers in order, we also can find numbers that pair up, so numbers that happen more than once. And the only number that happens more than once in this particular example is the first number, 2.3. So the 2.3 out front here is the mode, because it happens more than all the other numbers. So the mode is equal to 2.3. We'll put a box around that one. Now, we'd like to put it off, but now we've got to do the mean. And what I'm going to do the mean is I'm going to take the same order that I just used, but I'm going to line them up vertically. Okay, let's do this in black. So 2.3, 2.3. Notice I'm being very careful to line up my ones digits and my tenths digit. 2.7, 2.9, 3.2, 4.3. And if you remember back as to why I'm being so neat and so careful, where do most of the mistakes come from? They come from this step right here where I add them up. Again, let's make sure I have the same number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. That's good. Okay, and let's go ahead and add them. And when I add a big column of numbers, I look for easy ones to put together. Okay, so 3 and 7 adds up to 10. All right, and then 3 and 3 is 16. And then I'm going to add the 2. That'll give me 18. And then finally 18 plus 9 is 27. So I'm going to put the 7 down here. And I'm going to very carefully carry the 2. And notice my 2 that I carried is almost as big as all my other numbers. A lot of times when people carry, they write down really small numbers up here. And they tend to forget about them. So let's be really neat here. 2 plus 2 is 4. Let's just count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then 3 and 4 is 7, so we get 17, and the decimal point comes down, and I get 17.7. All right, now double check, and just real quickly, does that make sense? Well, my numbers are all around 2, 3, 4. Let's say about 3. If I do a quick clustering on these, 6 numbers at 3 apiece, 6 times 3 would be 18. That's very close to 17.7. So I feel pretty good about that as an answer. Now, let's take 17.7 and divide it by how many numbers we had. Again, that's 6. Let's put the decimal on top of the bar. Okay, and surprisingly enough, like I told you before, this is where we're going to make the mistakes. We're going to not make as many mistakes with the division. Okay, I'm a little worried that we're not going to have enough room here, so I'm just going to move this up a little bit. So we got a little bit more room here. There we go. All right, and so let's does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? So 6 goes into 17 twice, and you get 12 when you multiply, subtract, and we get 5. We check and make sure that's less than 6. It is, so far so good. We'll bring down the 7. 6 goes into 57, almost 10 times. So we'll go ahead and do 9, and 6 times 9 is 54. And we subtract, and we get 3. And let's go add one more 0. We're not going to actually use this, but we're going to use it for rounding. Okay? 6 goes into 30, 5 times exactly. And oh, wait a second. We get exactly 2.95. There's no reason to round. So in this case, my mean is exactly 2.95. And again, that makes sense, because look at my numbers. They're all kind of in the neighborhood of about 3. Remember what I said about measures of central tendency? Take a good look at these. Okay, each of these kind of describes the data. The median, 2.8, means that's the middle number. Okay, so you know half the numbers are smaller than that, and half the numbers are bigger than that. The mean is 2.95. Okay, and that's what you get if you add them all up and divide, and that's the average of all of them. And notice that the mean and the median in this case are pretty close together. And then finally the mode is the one that happened the most, and that was that one that happened, it happened to be the first number, so it's a little bit smaller than the other two. But again, it kind of says, if I had to guess, what's the most common number? 2.3 is. It's twice as likely as the other 4 numbers. All right, so these are measures of central tendency. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's take a look at a little bit easier numbers. Okay, 9, 10, 12, 13, 8, 9, 31, and 9. Okay, and this time I'm giving you 8 numbers, and I'd like you to quickly take a moment, pause the video, and again, just like we did before, I want you to find the mean, the median, and the mode. And then resume the recording as soon as you have done that. Okay, and we'll make sure that your answers match mine. Okay, you should have paused. If you haven't paused, pause now and do the mean, median, mode for these 8 numbers. Okay, well, you should already have this done, so I'm going to go kind of quickly. So follow along and see if your work matches this. So the first thing you should have done is just like we did before, put all the numbers in order. So the smallest number is 8, followed by 3 9s that I can see, and I'm going to cross them out and make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, next I see a 10, a 12, and a 13. Looks like those are right in order, so we'll write down 10, 12, and 13. Cross those out. And finally we have 31, which is the biggest number. Count how many data points I have. I had 8 in the original list. I have 8 in the new list. Okay, next let's find the median. So I can cheat. I'm going to take away 3 from the front and 3 from the back. We already know there's 8, so the middle 2 are going to be the 9 and the 10. So the median is halfway between 9 and 10, so the median is 9.5 or 9.5. Done. Okay? The mode is the one that happens the most, and when they're all lined up in order, it's much easier to notice that, yes, in fact, the 9s, there were 3 of those. The only other thing, none of the other numbers happen more than once. Okay? So clearly the mode is equal to 9. Okay? Very close to the median. And finally, if I add them all up, let's go ahead and since I'm making you do it, I'm going to do it by hand myself. I'm going to cheat a little bit. 3 9s I know is 27, so I'm going to go ahead and add that up as I go. 10 and 12 is 22, so I'm going to put that. And then 13 and 31 adds up to 44. Okay, all I did, and I'll show you what I did, I took the original 8, I took the 3 9s and I put those together. I took the 10 and the 12 and I put those together for the 22, and the 13 and 31. So I've already done a little bit of the addition. This way the column's not quite as long, and it makes it a little less unwieldy to add. 8 and 7 is 15, and 6 is 21. Carry the 2. I'm going to go ahead and put the 2 right there, and I get 6 and 10. I get 101. All right, and 101, there were a total of 8 numbers, so I'm going to divide by 8. We'll go out 2 decimal places. We'll go ahead and set it up immediately, and we're going to get 1, which is 8. Subtract, we get 2, which is less than 8. So far, so good. Bring down the 1. 8 goes into 21 twice, which is 16. Get a remainder of 5. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 50 6 times, which is 48. Uh-oh, I'm running out of room at the bottom. And it's not going to write for me because it got a little too small. And then the last step would have been, I'm going to bring the 2 up instead of bringing the 0 down. So the last step would have been 8 goes into 20. And it's only going to go in twice. It's not even going to go in 3 times. So when I round this, the mean is going to round. Since all the numbers were whole numbers, it doesn't make much sense to go much past the 10th. So I'm going to round this approximately equals to, and that was not very good. Let me do that a little bit better. Okay, the approximately equals to symbol should look like a wavy equal sign like that. And I'm going to round it to 12.6. Now I want you to stop for a second. I want you to look at the data. Okay, 12.6. That would actually be right here in the data, wouldn't it? Only 2 of the numbers are bigger than 12.6, and the 13 is only barely bigger than the 12.6. Okay, all the rest of the numbers, a total of 6 of them, are smaller than 12.6. Whereas if you look at the mode is 9, so it's kind of towards the front. Only 1 number is smaller, and 4 of the numbers are bigger. But take a look at the median. Okay, the median is always right in the middle. Half the numbers are smaller, half the numbers are bigger. So this is going to bring up another question. And that question is, what is the best measure of central tendency? Okay, so in this case, I would argue that the best measure of central tendency, the best one to kind of show what a typical data point is going to be, is the median. Okay, and the reason is the mode, like I said, is kind of all over the place. So unless we're specifically looking for something where we really care about which number happened the most, we want to know kind of what a typical data point is going to be. And the mean, in this case, because of the 31, because of this big number out here, it's a lot higher than most of the rest of the data. Okay? In fact, we could say that the mean has been skewed. Okay? And I can't spell today. I believe it's just one W, but there might be 2 W's in that word. My apologies if I made a mistake there. All right, which brings us to our final concept of this lesson, and that is the term outlier. Okay, an outlier is defined in your book as a number that is much greater or much smaller than the rest of the data. And as you could see on this previous example, 31 was a lot bigger than all the other numbers. And what that does is it skews the mean more than any other number. Okay, it doesn't affect the mode much because the biggest or smallest number probably isn't going to be the mode. It only happens once or twice. Okay, and it doesn't affect the median a whole lot because it's just one more big number or one more small number. The middle number will still stay pretty much the same. It might move up one or two to the left or the right. But since you added that 31 into the sum before you find the average, it really disproportionately changed the average. Okay, so back to the question, which measure is best? Well, when we have an outlier, it really messes with the mean. And so when there's an outlier, we almost always go with the median as the best. Okay? Another reason, sometimes we'll go with the mode, but another good reason we don't go with the mode that much is sometimes there isn't even going to be a mode. Okay, and so we're going to talk about this notion of what is the best measure of central tendency. Let me give you a couple examples. If I wrote down data that was not numeric, but let's say I just had a survey of everybody and I asked everybody what their favorite color was. Well, favorite implies the color that people pick the most. So the measure of central tendency we're kind of leaning towards there would be the mode. Okay? But if I said I wanted to line everybody up and find out how big your shoe sizes are, and I wanted to find kind of the middle shoe size, well, that would probably be a good one to do the median. Another good one, let's say I wanted to add up the number of letters in our names. And let's say a couple years ago I taught a family, and they had a very cool ethnic Russian name. It was Moliviotics Dekfiakowski. Very, very long, even harder to spell than it was to say. And if I did the example where we added up how many letters there were in our names, well, clearly that would have been an outlier, and we would have got a really big average because of that one really long name. Okay? On the other hand, there are very good times that we want to talk about averages. Usually your grades are averages, where you take all of the test scores you got, we want them all to count equally, so we add them up and we divide by how many there were. Most of your grades tend to be means. They tend to be averages. Okay? So there are different situations where sometimes the mean is the best measure of central tendency. There are other examples where the median, especially if there's an outlier, the median is the best measure of central tendency, and then there's some rare cases where the mode is going to be the best measure of central tendency. Okay? And again, we'll talk about that more in class tomorrow. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. That's pretty much all I have for you today. We've already gone a little bit over 20 minutes, so I apologize for the length of the video. But we're gonna just say that's the end, and we will continue. We'll do some good practice on this in class tomorrow. So thank you very much for watching mean, median, mode. And again, the thing that you want to review or really be careful of, what's new, is the stuff I wrote in red on this screen right here. Okay, the little things that we need to be careful of. Otherwise, mean, median, mode is kind of a review lesson. All right, good night, everybody.